A source of nightmares since their creation, what lies beyond and beneath bridges have cast fear into the hearts of young and old for centuries. Even now, in modern society, these stories of hauntings and monsters still exist today. Welcome to Below the Forest Floor. My name is Nancy and I'm here with my co-host / husband, Ryan.
Hello.
And today we are going to be discussing haunted bridges, why we fear them, and theories as to why we still believe in scary stories about them today, because we have access to the news. A lot of these stories, some people believe are made up, so you would think, a lot less people would believe in these things without the evidence. But I'm just going on rambling on my own little thing. Before we get started, though, I did want to wish you guys a happy October. It is October 5th. I was supposed to put this out, a couple of days ago, but I thought it would be fun to wait till Ryan and I's anniversary to do this episode because we love spooky things. That's why we got married in October. We had like a kind of Halloween themed wedding, and I just wanted to say happy anniversary to my husband.
I want to say it back to you. Happy anniversary.
Thank
and
you.
It's been 2 years.
Yep, it's been 2 years since we got married. Right before that pandemic hit, we lucked out. But I am so thankful to be spending this year with you, and I'm so thankful for everything you've done for us as a family. I love you so much.
Thank you, hon. I love you guys too.
All right, so moving forward, I feel like a lot of our fears of bridges come from stories we were told as children, or at least some start that way. Obviously, cautionary tales are told so kids don't go getting themselves hurt, and of course you don't want kids playing, near bridges with cars or under the bridges, because I'm sure in my town you found a lot of things under bridges. But that's usually why scary stories are told to these kids, so that they don't do something they're not supposed to. But I do think that the most popular story involving a bridge from our childhood would be the Three Billy Goats Gruff, like the story of the three goats that crossed that little bridge with the troll underneath. And if you guys have never heard it, basically there's three goats, they're trying to cross a bridge, and a troll lives underneath, and the troll eats goats, so they try to outsmart him, and eventually the story has a happy ending. No spoilers in case you've never read it, I guess. So go ahead and read it if you feel like it. But that's basically the premise. And I know I personally became kind of weary of monsters hiding underneath bridges because of that. I was like, wait, bridges have monsters under them that eat things and people? Ryan, did you ever feel like that?
There was some times where it's just because a lot of times you'd go across a bridge, it'd be at night, so it would be dark and kind of spooky. So that's something that kind of just was always on my mind before.
Oh, really? I do know, you guys have that little, right next to your childhood home, you guys have the creek with, the little uphill part. Now, and that creeps me out whenever I pass by it. It's just so eerie, because it's I think, the unknown. I think that's what really scares people about it. And, on top of that, I was already afraid of bridges with water underneath, because around this time I was also being told stories about La Llorona, a woman who drowned her kids in a stream, whose ghost now wanders near rivers and small bodies of water searching for them. When I asked my dad if that meant that she could be under the bridge we lived near because there was a creek there, he said absolutely. At no point did he think I should not tell my child that she could really just be right there. If anything, when the train would pass, he would be, "Do you hear that? That's her. She's looking for her kids." And it's the middle of the night, and I have school the next day, and I'm just sitting there almost in tears being told that I could hear La Llorona nearby. It's oh, there she is. It was, boy, did I grow up in that kind of a household. But if you guys want to hear more about La Llorona, make sure you check out episode 3 of this podcast, because I did go into detail about her quite a bit in her background. So now, our first bridge tonight is going to be about the Avon Haunted Bridge in Avon, Indiana. The bridge was built back in 1906 and resides over a river with a road next to it. Interestingly enough, this bridge is so old it was there before the town was even named Avon, and this particular bridge has many stories surrounding possible hauntings. The first starts with its construction. Apparently, there was a man who was working on the bridge when it was being built and he lost his footing. Some say it was due to clumsiness, some say it's because he was drunk. I'm not gonna say anything because, first of all, I couldn't find anything about this guy. And apparently, he fell into the wet cement below. He was unable to get himself up and out of the way, so that's where he stayed. So allegedly, I guess that would say that his body is still there if this man existed. I don't know. But I tried looking it up about, an incident with this happening with a man falling into the cement down below. But some people say that nobody noticed and that's why his body is still there and why he died, because honestly, cement isn't quicksand. You're not going to just not be able to climb out of cement unless you're getting buried in it, I guess. And I think that's where the drunk theory for me comes in, because if he were just clumsy, I feel like at least you're not so clumsy you can't get back up just because it's wet, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's also one of those things that, so if you're pouring concrete, you're pouring cement, there are people that are watching, because you got to make sure there's a lot of things you have to do by watching it. So if somebody would have fell in as they were filling it, that's the only way that he could have been covered in it, because you're not going to sink into it really too quickly. So yeah, somebody would have probably seen him if it did happen that way.
Maybe he's the reason for OSHA. He's the reason now people watch. Everyone's like, dang it, Tim. Now we all got to keep an eye on everyone because we can't just trust you guys anymore. But Tim's not his name. Don't look that up. It was just a random name I gave him. So people believe, that he was drunk and that was most likely the story. But I'm not going to name names in case this person was real. But people say that now his ghost haunts this bridge. Another story about the bridge being haunted and having a situation like this that is similar is that, according to legend, 4 people were working on this bridge and all lost their footing simultaneously somehow. The story doesn't say how it happened. It just says that all 4 of them fell at the same time into the river below. And people heard the splashes and the thuds. They ran over to go and try to help, but their bodies were never recovered. They didn't find anything. They didn't see anybody. But the thing that kind of confuses me about that part of the story is that I saw pictures of the creek with the road next to it underneath this bridge, and it's very shallow. That's a very shallow little... I can barely even call it a river. It looks more like a creek. There's no way you wouldn't have seen at least 4 men in in that water all together, I don't know. Or I'm not good at swimming, so would they have floated at least?
Well, depending on how, sorry, I lost my train of thought as soon as I was, but if it was really shallow, they would have just hit and gotten hurt and maybe gotten knocked out or something like that. Yeah. But if it wasn't really deep, they would still be probably floating.
Yeah. So, because I don't know about floating. I never learned to do that growing up. And the fact that it was 4 people all at the same time and nobody can really tell why it happened is the part that is kind of sketchy. But apparently that's one of the reasons people believe that this bridge is haunted, is that those 4 men all fell to their death and nobody ever found them. I did try to find some news articles about anything like this being reported because, I like to see the real part of history when I actually tell these stories, like I have in the Haunted Forts episode, where I actually found historical documents of these existing people that they say now haunt the areas. I didn't find anything. I didn't see anything on it at all, not even deaths being reported on it, really. But some say that due to the period of when the incidents occurred, that it would be difficult to find a paper trail, as it was probably either swept under the rug so whatever company or rich person was making this bridge wouldn't get in trouble, or because they were, in their words, just laborers, so no one really would have cared to have said anything about it anyway. So that's just dispensable people. Oh well. I'm sure that there's reasons on both ends for that. Our final ghostly theory as to why the Avon Haunted Bridge is haunted is actually the most popular by far. It is said that on a night like any other, a young woman decided to walk with her baby in her arms along the bridge. As they were crossing, she lost her footing and they plunged into the river below. Now her spirit wanders the area looking for her baby, and as she does so, it is said that she wails extremely loudly. So loudly, in fact, that people say you must honk your horn while passing underneath the bridge to drown out her cries. I do find it interesting how similar this is to the story of La Llorona in a way. A mother losing her child somewhere, near water, and then the spirit just wandering the earth crying for them. It does make me kind of wonder, how this particular story varied and where it came from originally. Because the story of La Llorona is really old, that I mentioned it in the other episode. And I wonder if maybe it just derived from there, or maybe because maybe it happened so often, or like people were so afraid of this happening that they just started making stories about it. So I'm not sure.
It kind of seems like the same as some of the other urban legends where it's like one takes hold and then there are other ones that crop up that are very, very similar.
Yeah, I feel you. And I do think it's really interesting to hear the variation. Sometimes just like some are too similar, and it starts feeling like it's either super fake or it's super real. But that's just something that comes with urban legends and these kinds of stories. But that's not the only weird thing about the Avon Haunted Bridge. There are some honorable mentions of varying stories that I did find that have to do with it that aren't exactly about ghosts, but I did think they were kind of weird, so I wanted to share them with you all. The first is that if you go on an extremely hot summer day, like it's got to be unusually hot out, you will see what looks like huge water stains begin to appear on the side of the bridge. And people claim that those are the tears of ghosts. I don't know where they got like the connection of water stains on the bridge to ghost tears. But that's what people say. If you go there on a hot day, you will see the tears of ghosts on the side of a bridge. And that is like, I was over here like thinking like, man, that's a big ghost, or that's a lot of ghosts. They're like all just crying in one side of the bridge. But the second is that some locals claim that the bridge itself is a supernatural like kind of bridge. I was gonna say entity, but that's not really right because it's not alive, I guess. Well, not a lot of the things I talk about are alive, like ghosts. But they say that if you go really late at night, that the bridge actually glows like a bluish green color. I have not seen photos of this. I looked it up. I haven't seen too many personal stories. It's just a few people here and there saying, yeah, if you go really, really late, like you gotta go really late. They didn't say how late or how early, I guess in the morning, but if you go, the entire bridge will glow. And I'm not sure when they're saying this incident started occurring, which would be interesting. Cause like, when would this have started? Would it be after the ghosts, before the ghosts? Did the ghosts make it glow? What would make a bridge glow? Like colors. So I don't know. That's just some story that I've heard being tossed around. And some people just say like the bridge itself is, what would you call it? Like not haunted, I guess, because like people already say it's haunted, but like they say it's a bad place to be. Like, like when people make portals and stuff. Some people say that the bridge is the reason people are falling to their deaths. Like it's bad luck. And that's what has caused so many, what people are saying is deaths on the bridge. But they don't explain how exactly. They don't have like a backstory to it. I think the reason for so many urban legends of bridges, like in general, being haunted comes from a fear of the unknown. And I think also the falling aspect of it, because you see a bridge, your first thought is don't fall, don't fall, don't look over. Because that's my first thought. I don't know if like that's what you think. So you're not really as afraid of heights as I am.
Not necessarily afraid of heights, but it depends. Like I don't get the vertigo from just being at a high place. It's looking down that gets me. That's the only thing.
Have you ever like had the courage to look over a bridge down below? You have?
Yeah, I've done that a lot actually. I don't like the feeling that it makes my stomach feel. So
you are so brave. I'm like, I put the blinders on and I'm like, I am not looking over the side of this. I could not. But it's just a piece of concrete. And you wonder to yourself, when you cross it, like let's say in a car and you're like, can this little piece of concrete hold the weight of myself, my family, and my car, and multiple cars that may be on the bridge? Because there have been incidents in history where bridges have collapsed, and you would think, yeah, sure, professionals built this, but there have been professionals that have built bridges that have collapsed and fallen. And so you really start to wonder, could I be next? Could I be the next person who is unfortunate enough to be on this bridge when it falls? Even just, I remember when we first moved here, there was a town nearby and it had a bridge connecting from one side of that town to the next. And we were talking about going to the town that was next to that. And we had to find out on the news that that bridge was apparently closed off due to work because it was unstable. And that scared the heck out of me. Just like the thought of we could have been in that situation, like going over an unstable bridge. Like, how did they find out? That's so scary to me. And honestly, I don't know if you've ever seen Beetlejuice, but there's this scene where the two, I guess they're kind of the main characters, but not really, because the main character is the girl Lydia. But the other two main characters that become Ghost, Barbara and Adam, they took a little, nosedive off the side of a bridge in the movie. And that's also something that scares me, especially because in the town that I live in now, there's a red covered bridge, just like in the Beetlejuice movie. And so, like, I remember when your mom actually took me across that bridge, my heart was pounding so hard. I thought I was going to start crying.
Oh, yeah, no. I completely understand, and it's creepy to go over it at night, but yeah, I understand.
You've gone over it at night. Oh yeah, you grew up here.
Having to go out that way.
It scares me. Well, not all haunted or spooky bridges involve people, though. Up next, we are actually making our way to a town named Dumbarton, located in Scotland, to talk about the Overton Bridge. The Overton Bridge is said to be absolutely breathtaking with ornate Gothic designs. It is an ideal path to walk when visiting this area of Scotland to appreciate the beautiful architecture. Unfortunately, you may want to leave your fuzzy walking companions at home when crossing this particular bridge because you may end up becoming a statistic. If you have never heard of this bridge before, it is said to be a place where over 300 dogs since the 1950s have jumped, and 50 of them did not survive. Although a ravine is located below, there are lots of huge rocks and the drop is 50 feet. So although the survival rate has been kind of high, it's not always a guarantee. And I don't think some people should take this chance, because you're about to hear about some people who did take this chance because they couldn't believe that this is real. If you look up the numbers for this bridge, some people will say that the numbers are up to 600, but they're usually more unreliable sources, which is like tabloids trying to really beef up the numbers and be like, oh no, it's been so many, but it's about 300 that have been recorded though. And the Overton Bridge was built in 1895 by John Campbell White, who actually inherited the farm that's nearby and wanted to extend his driveway over the ravine next to his home. That was like the entire reason this beautiful bridge that people go visit was even built. Because rich people. And so, according to people who have not heeded the warning of leaving their fur babies at home, when attempting to cross the bridge with their dogs, it seems as if something changes in their demeanor and the dog begins to run wildly to the side of the bridge and they just leap over into the ravine below. Nothing can stop them. They will call for their dogs and it's like they're possessed. They just start bolting. And the owners have no idea why, because some of them have even said that their dogs have never acted that way before. They've never chased anything, and they just run. The most recent incidents include a border collie named Bonnie having done this in 2016. So it's pretty recent. When her owner tried to cross the bridge during a walk, apparently Bonnie froze near the entrance of the bridge and suddenly looked as if she was possessed. Then immediately ran away from her owner and took the plunge. Luckily, Bonnie did survive, but her owner was completely traumatized. Many people who have visited the area claim that you can feel a dark, ghostly energy surrounding this entire bridge, as if there's something terribly heavy there. Some say that it may be the dogs that have passed, causing a majority of the energy here to feel off, but another theory of why the events tend to occur has to do with the widow of John Campbell White, the guy who wanted to extend the bridge. In 1908, John passed away from an unknown illness, leaving his wife, Grace Eliza McClure, to mourn his death for the next 30 years until her own passing. It is said that she spent many of her living days and nights during these 30 years at the window overlooking the Overton Bridge after John's death. Now, people claim that if you look closely enough, you can still see her spirit in the same window. There's even been photos taken of this window where you can see a woman peeking through curtains in what looks like period clothing, where Grace usually spent her days. People would say, oh, she's up there. And that's where they find these pictures. I saw them. They're so creepy.
Really?
Very. Witnesses began calling this spirit the White Lady of Overton and say that she drives the dogs mad, and that's what makes them want to jump. Like, she's so distraught and she got so angry over the years of having to be alone that she doesn't want to see people happy, you know?
Oh, yeah.
This phenomena has been baffling so many people that scientists have even gotten involved trying to figure out what's happening, because they don't understand why so many dogs are deciding to plunge off the side of a bridge. And the first theory is that there are so many little critters down below the bridge that the dogs just see them or they smell them and they just want to go after them. Like, they can't think of anything else except going after these little creatures, especially because a lot of the dogs that have made the jump have been more likely to be hunting dogs or dogs that are more athletic and tend to go after small animals. So they kind of think maybe that's the connection. A lot of other people say that the foliage and landscape of the terrain below kind of gives an optical illusion of the ground being level. So the dogs don't think, oh, I'm very high up. What they see is just concrete, then ground. So they just jump off thinking there's more ground, but in reality, it's just a drop off, basically. According to believers, though, the reactions of the dogs before they jump is too strange and too much of a coincidence for it to just be a dog being silly and jumping off, or a dog just being like, oh, there's a small animal, I'm gonna go get that. They believe that there are dark entities. Some people even said demonic, like entities kind of luring the dogs off of there, because they're like, no, the way the dogs get that look in their eye, it looks like there's something on the edge of the bridge telling them, beckoning them to come over the side of the bridge, and that's why that happens. But some people just believe it's the whole bad eyesight for dogs and believing that they think there's more road there. And a lot of things that I did notice that weren't explained or that I didn't write down was people mentioned a lot of the dogs that did this weren't on leashes. Their owners didn't leash their dogs.
Yeah.
And so it was easier for the dogs to just go and do that. They weren't able to be stopped, really, because the owners were like, oh, it'll be fine. This bridge, it's just a weird superstition. I don't have to leash my dog. They're pretty good, but
I would just never have my dog off a leash if I'm going over a bridge anyways, because it's the reason why we don't let ours get like too far out the window also, is just because just in case they don't realize they're that high up or that the car is moving in a dangerous way or something. It's just a sad story and I just would never want to try.
Exactly. And the fact that these people also are not taking the precautions, you can believe your pet is very smart, but you also want to be a good pet parent and you want to leash your animal to make sure that this incident doesn't happen. It's a lot harder for the dog to jump over when you could grab onto him, But like I said earlier, these incidents do happen quite often, and something that I thought was really weird. This one is like, this one actually took the cake for me. A dog people watch this happen. A dog actually went and jumped off the bridge, survived, ran back around, went back up the bridge, jumped again after it had already done it once, and knowing what was going to happen to it, falling into the ravine below. It decided to do it again, and people could not stop it from doing it. People tried, and that's, I think, is the really weird part. What do you think?
I don't know what to think about that one, honestly. It's just a really sad, just thinking about it.
Yeah, it is. And the fact that at this point, you would think they would put railings on them by now with so many dogs having done this. Now, making our way back to the U.S., in my hometown of San Antonio, Texas, in the Elm Creek area, we've got the Donkey Lady Bridge. Ryan, when you were living in Texas, did you ever hear about the Donkey Lady Bridge?
I have heard about it before I moved out there, but I only heard about it a couple of times because it was what was always talked about with some of the other urban legends of Texas as well.
Do you remember anything about what you were told at the time? So, I didn't grow up with this story. I heard about it. People would mention the name, but they wouldn't say what it was. They wouldn't go into the story. They would just be like, oh yeah, Donkey Lady Bridge. And then that was it. That was my extent of the knowledge of Donkey Lady Bridge. So I decided that I would, look it up and learn a little bit more. So if this isn't the story you heard growing up, I am sorry. This is the story I learned just now from looking up all and actual news articles of people retelling the tale. So apparently the ghost or entity that is called the Donkey Lady, she either has from the waist down goat legs, according to some stories, or in other stories, she is just called that because she is extremely disfigured from the experience that she had that caused her to be unalive. So we will get into that right now. Sometime in the 1800s, a woman lived near Elm Creek with her husband and kids. They were extremely poor and barely had any livestock. The most important and expensive being a donkey that they owned. Well, one day some kind of youngish looking guy showed up and he began to torture their donkey for fun. He started hitting the donkey with a stick and started screaming obscenities at it. And the donkey got really upset and tried to fight back because obviously it's getting attacked. Well, this made it even worse, so the guy started beating this creature even harder, and to the point where it was almost going to pass. The family heard the animal's cries and tried to run to go and help, and the guy wasn't listening when they told him to stop, so they began to throw rocks and things at this guy to try to get him to leave the donkey alone. He tells them that they'll be sorry and he runs off. It turns out the kid was from a rich family and brought friends later that night to assault the family. The father of the family tried to distract the mob by, running out and trying to allow time for the kids to get out. Well, they shot him down immediately as he stepped out the door. And after they did so, they ended up setting the house on fire, and the woman was able to get out, but she was extremely disfigured. And the kids were not able to make it out. So she runs out of the house fire, and it scares the guy so much because her face resembled what they said was a melted candle from how disfigured she was from the fire. And it scared the guys so much they didn't even try to gun her down. They just started running off into the night. And the woman was never heard from again, and now they say that her spirit wanders the area seeking vengeance for her family. In another story, apparently, it's the husband that sets the fire with the wife and the kids inside. And the Donkey Lady spirit roams the bridge area in sorrow because of what her husband did to her and for grieving her children. Some people that agree with either of these stories tend to also disagree on the timeline of this. So some people believe in the story being in like the 1800s, like I mentioned earlier. But some people believe that this happened in the 50s. I'm not sure why or what made them believe that, because none of this actually gives any details.
I think part of it could actually be the fact that some people get facts wrong if they're being told by someone, like if they're being told by someone in maybe like the 60s or 70s as a kid, they might think of it being in the 50s because, like they're being told a story from around that area. So they just kind of, that area of time. So they just kind of like link those two things together, maybe.
That actually makes sense. And based off of that, another theory, if this was set in the 50s, the second theory would make sense, or the second story about the man setting the house on fire because of how abusive men were around that time era. Like that era of time, a lot of men did just whatever they wanted to hurt their wives, and that could have been maybe one of the things. Really abusive husband finally got tired of it, wanted to just get rid of everything.
So it could have been one of those things too where the story was changed because the environment, like the time of things kind of changed as well. So the story took like inspiration from some of the things that was happening around that time.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Like maybe it started off as the other original first story, and evolved. Like
what was that thing? The art mimics life.
Yeah.
Something like that. Kind of like that.
And I get that. And all urban legends the reason urban legends are so easily like manipulated into new versions of stories is because, like you mentioned, they end up matching the time period that they're from. And because so many things like incidents like that were happening in the 50s, maybe that's why it turned from, instead of just a random person hitting a donkey and then going back to set the house on fire, maybe it was the man of the house, air quote, doing something like that to harm his family, because that was very prevalent back then. And so maybe that's an idea. But those are the two stories I've heard. If you heard others, feel free to let us know. And we can share it on social media and stuff, because we love hearing stories from you guys about what you've heard. Not everyone's going to hear the same story. It's like one big game of telephone. So, according to the people that say the woman was burned alive by her husband, she made it out, but she was shunned by society and ran into the woods of the Elm Creek area, where she lived the rest of her days in the woods, becoming more and more spiteful of society until she passed, and now her ghost haunts the area around the bridge there. So that's the other part of that story and theory as to what happened. Allegedly, there are pictures that people have taken of their cars after parking it on Donkey Lady Bridge, and there is some pretty extensive damage that is being done by a ghost, in my opinion. Ryan, I've seen some of these cars and they were smashed in. Like, it looked like it was a hammer. It was so weird. Some people show signs of hoof prints on the car. Some show damage to the hood and sides of their cars. It looks like she just violently hit the sides. Like, I don't know what these people were going through. And possibly trying maybe to get to the passengers because of like the hit marks on the doors and stuff. So I don't know if like that was what maybe this entity was attempting to do. But she apparently also screams at them. Like, when you park your car there and you wait, when she appears, she will scream at the car, or she'll scream through the window at you. How do you react to that?
Which kind of makes me feel like that the story might have actually taken place in the 1800s. Like whichever story that kind of came first, I feel like that it might have been that one, just because of the fact that cars weren't a big cars like they are nowadays are kind of the same as they were in the 50s.
Yeah.
But in the 1800s, they were vastly different.
That makes sense, actually. I didn't think of that. She was like, car! or big metal horse. But yeah, apparently she will assault your car, scream at you, like these terrible screeches that is... Some people have said it made them cry. The sounds that they heard coming from like the woods. They didn't even see this person. They just heard it and they just started crying. But if you would like to try this for yourself, the legend goes that you must take your vehicle to the bridge, shut off your headlights. So they want you to be in the dark at night with no headlights, and you just sit there and you wait, and she's supposed to appear, and whatever she does ends up with your car getting wrecked, apparently.
See, you've got to shut off your headlights so you don't see the kids come out with hammers.
That's like there's so many of them. But I honestly couldn't find any stories as to how some people claim that this donkey lady ended up with hooves for feet, though, because like that was something I mentioned at the beginning, where some people said that she had hooves for feet, and it's like, okay, what part of any of these stories, where did that happen?
Actually, I do know where that could have come from.
All right.
Because of the story talking about how it all started with their donkey, where the donkey was killed.
Yeah.
And so her spirit being so angry about what had happened would have taken some of the presence of the thing that started it all, which was the donkey, which was something that she loved. See,
that's why I love having you on here. I didn't even think about that. Like, that's a great idea and theory as to what possibly happened, because I've heard that happen before. It didn't click with me, that she possibly loved this so much. She took a part of the appearance of it. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Another theory that I kind of read about, but it was a little weird to talk about on here, was that some people believe that people did some people believe that they did black magic type stuff in this area and summoned a demon, and that's what the donkey lady is. And that's why she has donkey legs, because demons, when they're described, or when the devil is described by some people, because we want to respect all religions here. But some people describe them as having part like a chicken leg or a donkey leg. And so maybe, according to some of these people, they believe it's just a demon that was summoned there. People didn't put it away, and now it just kind of causes chaos. And it kind of makes sense to me, because the fact that this entity is able to physically interact with the vehicles, and it's not just like a normal ghost, like a poltergeist or anything, because it causes a lot of damage. It actually does really scary things trying to harm people, and that kind of fits the MO of what people describe as demons, I guess. But what do you think?
Well, because there's also in some mythological circles of satyrs, or however you want to pronounce it, basically being, what was it? It's like some of them are talked about as being like kind of, there's a big link between them and demons.
Really?
So, yeah.
I didn't know that there was a link between them. I thought it was just like a coincidence. A fun little coinkydink.
It might be, but it also could be that's where the mythology of it came from, too.
Yeah, that makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense. Well, we're going to be moving 4 hours north of San Antonio, where we end up in, I don't know to say this in Spanish or like with an English accent, but Lantana or Lantana.
I would have said Lantana.
Yeah, Lantana, Texas. Lantana. I'm sorry if I butchered it. I've never been there. I never even heard of it till I started doing this episode. Where we find the Goat Man's Bridge, also known as the Old Alton Bridge. Oh, Ryan, you sound... I want to hear a little bit about what you got to say before I start reading the story.
This was the one that I wanted to show you because of all of the activism stuff that we have kind of been a part of lately. It's a story that I really thought that would interest you, because it was one that had the African American man who was a goat cheese seller, that a couple of guys, because this was around that time, they didn't privy to his business, yeah, and they had hurt him, beat him, threw him off the bridge with his goat and everything.
Oh, really?
And then a lot of bad things started happening on that bridge shortly after that. To summarize what you're about to say.
That's really interesting, because in none of the stories I found, there was a goat being thrown off. I never found any stories like that.
Oh, the one that I remember hearing about was that, but that might be me linking the whole thing together a little bit in my mind as well.
Or there just might be a version that you heard like that, because like I mentioned earlier, urban legends, they're so different because people will remember details differently. People will think they remember something being a certain way, or they'll just be like, oh, what if I add this element in? Because then it makes more sense if it sounds like this. According to locals, the story goes back towards like the 1930s era, where a young African American man and his family lived on a farm where they produced cheese, milk, and other goods from the goats that they tended to. The head of the household was a young man named Oscar Washburn, and he was very proud of his farm and business, which obviously in the 1930s, to have an entire farm and to have livestock on it and start creating products from it, that's huge. That's something that's extremely big for that era, especially being a POC or a BIPOC. And so he would sell these products and started his own little business, and he was so proud of it, in fact, that he couldn't wait to advertise his farm and went down to the Old Alton Bridge to set up his sign letting people know where they could go purchase the goods. And he called himself the Goat Man because of all the little goats on his farm, and he basically put on the sign to go visit the Goat Man. And unfortunately, the KKK, the stories I read, it was the KKK.
Yes, it was.
Got wind of this and decided that they needed to get rid of him. On a dark night, while Oscar was out admiring his farm, a mob arrived, and they dragged Oscar down to the Old Alton Bridge, where they hung him over the side, dangling above the waters.
Now the version of it that I remember, it was a lot of that was the same, but the one that I remember a little bit was that they caught him in transit as he was crossing the bridge. This is the one that
Really?
I remember hearing about.
Oh. Yeah, because the ones that I had read like this, they went over to go get him because he had put the sign telling people where his home and business was.
Yeah, because the one that I heard was when he was setting the sign up, then, they found him.
Oh, that's awful. So, after they put him over the bridge, he was obviously murdered, did not survive that, and what the KKK members did was they went back to the farm and they burned the whole thing down so Oscar would have nothing left, because when they had gone back to check on the body, it wasn't there anymore hanging, so they assumed that maybe he got loose and he went back home. So they burned everything down. Turns out he was not there, so his family just perished in the fire and everything that they had, basically. And so that's where, he got really upset and his ghost ended up haunting the bridge because of what had happened. Some people claim that this isn't the story at all and that the goat man's wife is the one who haunts the bridge, still looking for her murdered husband, which I found interesting because I'd never heard that version at all from anything.
Yeah, 'cause the one that I remember hearing about was the fact that it was just his spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I find it interesting that some people say it was the wife that was haunting the bridge looking for him.
Which that makes sense too.
Yeah, it actually kind of does. But another story that doesn't even have to do with that has to do with people claiming that a group of people went to that bridge one night and summoned a demon that was a man and goat fused together, and they didn't know how to put it away, and so that's what causes all of the very violent hauntings that occur there.
Put that thing back where it came from, or so help me.
So now the hauntings vary depending on who you ask. Some people that believe the first story claim that if you drive over the bridge at night, you'll hear a splash followed by a deep maniacal laughter. Some say that glowing red eyes appear in the brush nearby and they actually watch you as you drive by. Others that believe the demon story claim that if you honk 3 times, that the demon goat man will appear carrying goats and human heads. Why though? What is the point of carrying these things?
Well, because the symbol for Satanism and stuff like that was goats.
I love how I don't even put that together. My brain's like, I don't get how. What is? I am off my game. Ryan, see, that's why you're here. That's why you help me with this, because I'm thinking too hard on these things. I don't catch the obvious, but apparently he will have goats and human heads in his arms, and have you heard about that, the demon part of things, or him carrying that stuff?
The version that I heard about was kind of a mixture of the two, where it was everything that was bad that happened on that bridge summoned a demon to it. So it was it was his spirit, but it was a very evil one from it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand that is also because once you get so many stories, people just start sticking it all together, and it's this huge mismatch of everything. But this episode wouldn't be complete without us talking about the Crybaby Bridge. Now, I was a bit hesitant when I considered the thought of talking about the Crybaby Bridge, not because of the horrific backstory, but because it isn't just one bridge located in one place. Apparently, there are Crybaby bridges located all over the US with varying stories behind why they are haunted. The most popular Crybaby Bridge story does happen to reside about 3 miles northwest of Monmouth. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Monmouth. Do you know where that's at?
No.
About 30 to 40 minutes away from us.
No, I don't want it. So we'll start there, then give honorable mentions to the other states that claim to have their own after. Our first story starts with a bus carrying elementary school children through flooded waters over this bridge, and unfortunately, it plunges off the edge. There are no survivors, and now when you cross the bridge, you can hear the sounds of these children crying if you listen closely enough. Another story says that if you put your car in neutral on the bridge, the spirits of these children will push it to the other side. Bonus points if you put baby powder on your bumper, and you can end up with small hands on there printed.
So I do have a family member who has said that he has went there, and he said that because you put your car keys, you don't just put it in neutral, you shut off your car. You put the keys on the dash. They moved. From what I can remember hearing about was that they moved. The keys moved.
The keys on the dash
keys moved. And then there was handprints, and he said that he was so terrified he would never go back.
That's really interesting, because this is like the most popular version I read about putting the car in neutral and all that, but that's terrifying. Now that is scary, the car being off and that happening.
Because having the car off with the keys moved like that, nobody else in the car can say it's like, oh, you're moving the car or anything like that.
Exactly. And it was so funny because that version of the story was almost word for word like the San Antonio train tracks, the haunted train tracks, which if you guys want to know more about that, I did do an episode about that a while back as well.
I'm pretty sure the railroad tracks got the story from this one, though, because this one was a lot older than that one, I believe.
People actually say the other one's older, but
really?
Yeah, but this story is like everywhere. That same version you like put your car in neutral, something, little hands are going to push it. Like that literally is everywhere. There's so many of those. But that's, so if you guys want to check it out, the San Antonio Haunted Railroad Tracks episode is somewhere not too far behind this one, because I did it pretty recently actually. But now the Crybaby Bridge story from Maryland is set in 1875, where a young mother and her daughter were crossing over a bridge in their buggy when the whole thing tipped, plunging the little girl named Annie into the waters below. It was raining that day, and a loud clap of thunder had spooked the horse, and there was nothing they could do. They eventually did find Annie's body, and they pulled her out, but they do still say that the spirit haunts the bridge to this day. People claim to hear a young girl crying from the river below when they cross this bridge, and some say that it can even be heard for miles around. So that's pretty spooky. The story of the Crybaby Bridge from Kentucky is a bit more literal, as people say that. I don't know how real this is. I did not try to look up articles on this because it's weird and it makes me feel bad, but it says that women would go to this bridge and literally throw their unwanted, deformed, or sick babies into the river below. Multiple women. Like, that was their landfill for this. This was the graveyard for it. And now you hear the babies crying there. Like, you hear baby cries coming from the waters below, apparently, when you go to that bridge. I don't know if it's true or not. I didn't look that up in particular because it just sounds too weird. It feels like somebody really just made that up to upset people. But I would hope it's not. Or I just see Ryan just shake his head like,
It's not something I want to, get into on the podcast, but I'll tell you a little bit more later.
Oh, no. I don't want to be sad. Not today. But those are some of the stories. There's so many more. If you guys look up Crybaby Bridge, there's like
part 2.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a part 2. There's like a huge list of crybaby bridges from all over the US. It's weird. But I don't know which of these stories came first. I don't know who decided to talk about haunted bridges and why some of them ended up the way they did. But something that I do know is that these haunted bridges belong here with us below the forest floor. Thank you so much for listening to tonight's episode, and we hope to see you all next week or this coming weekend when we discuss the legend of Bigfoot.
I am excited for that one.
Me too. I've been wanting to do the Bigfoot story for so long. But thank you so much for listening, guys, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.
We'll see you soon.